Imagine running distances that seem unfathomable to most of us, enduring physical and mental challenges that test the limits of human resilience. Joining me in a conversation today is a man by the name of Wes Plate. Wes competes in races in excess of 250 miles, all on foot, all while surviving on a mere 6 hours of sleep over the course of 4 days. We talk about the mental fortitude and physical endurance that is required to make it to the end of one of these absolutely insane races. Let's get into it. All right, Wes Plate, welcome, my man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for inviting me on.
If you can, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from and what do you do?
Yeah, well, I live near Seattle in a place called Everett, Washington, and I'm an ultra runner. Have found that I particularly like the long distance stuff, like 200 miles and bigger. I have a YouTube channel, and that came about because I used to be a professional video editor, and I got away from that to get on the technology side, and I really missed the creativity of it. And I saw an opportunity where I could make videos of the runs that I did to share with other people, so they could, decide if that race is for them. Anyway, that has developed into a world where I make a lot of videos now for my runs, and so kind of a little bit of a YouTuber slash ultra runner slash entrepreneur kind of guy living near Seattle.
Okay. For the folks listening that might not understand or be familiar with what an ultra marathon is, can you tell me, can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, of course. So technically, an ultra marathon is any distance that's bigger than a marathon. So anything longer than 26.2 miles. And that's generally starting at 50 kilometers, which is 31 miles. So most people will start their ultra journey training for and running a 50-kilometer race. And I did that myself too. But then there are longer distances, 50 miles and 100 kilometers are very popular. And then a lot of people set their sights on having to complete a 100-mile ultra marathon. And then there's longer distances than that too. So it kind of encompasses a lot of different sports, because in a lot of different ways, something like a 50-kilometer ultra marathon is a completely different thing than a 250 mile ultra marathon. But all of them are considered ultra marathons.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, what was the longest distance you've done yourself in one
So
race?
the longest for me has been well, according to the race, would be 250 miles. I've done the Cocodona 250 3 years in a row. But I think that my watch has shown that one of those might have been close to 260 miles. So somewhere between 250 and 260 miles I've done on my own 2 feet.
Okay. Wow. That's very impressive. What was the draw initially, when it comes to ultras, and what motivated you to pursue something as ambitious as a 250-mile race?
It was a bit of a journey. I didn't expect to end up doing such long ultras. And when I started running, I didn't start running until 2012, early 2012. I think I was just 38 years old. Is that right? I can't do the math in my head right now. But I started doing just basic running at that time. I ran my first half marathon in 2014. And around that time, I met some other runners in my local area who had some experience running longer distance stuff. And so I was kind of curious about what it would be like to run long distance, like an ultra. And I read a lot about it, listened to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of articles. And I had sort of heard through everything I read that a lot of ultra marathon runners had experienced some sort of almost like emotional, physical, and spiritual transformation as they went through a terrible pain cave and like had a hard time, but yet they overcame it and then came out stronger on the other side. I kind of felt like there was some sort of spiritual journey that I could go on and to experience it. And so that was sort of my motivation, was I wanted to feel this feeling that other runners were talking about. And then as I started to do my ultras, they were all tremendously difficult, but yet I was successful in completing them. And even when I did my first 100 miler, I was expecting at the end of that it was going to have been such a difficult race that surely I was going to have a spiritual moment. But then I got to the end of the race and it was over and I had a good time. It was certainly difficult, but I didn't have this sort of spiritual awakening at the end. So I guess I just kept pushing for longer in distances. And after I finished my first 200-mile race, which was the Moab 240 in 2019. That's when I really felt like I had found something special as a result of doing one of these events. It wasn't necessarily like angels singing with some beautiful aha moment, but I came to appreciate how our bodies are capable of anything. There's almost no distance that we can't do as long as we take care of ourselves along the way. In fact, in my first 200 miler, I was injured about halfway through. Around mile 120, I injured a hamstring and I couldn't run anymore. It hurt way too bad, but I could walk without any problems. So I hiked nearly most of the second half of the race, but at a fairly good pace. But even as I was doing that, I was healing. And by the end of the race, I actually was able to run again. But just that whole thing about bodies being able to sort of heal during the event was so amazing as a concept, and also to have experienced that's what got me into the really long distance stuff.
That is, wow. That is so awesome. Yeah. I've probably watched, I would say pretty much all your videos. I mean, they're
Awesome.
absolutely amazing. And, I'll make sure to put a link for your YouTube channel in here. But yeah, that is, I could kind of identify with some of those things. I've done some pretty extensive big wall rock climbing, and,
Oh, awesome.
done some stuff with, some back country, 50 miles. I've done 50, 60 miles in 2 days backpacking,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
stuff like that. But, I can kind of get what you're saying about that transformation, that it changes you. I mean,
Yeah.
it really does, deep
Mm-hmm.
down inside. And it's absolutely impressive what you do.
Thank you. It's been really an interesting journey because along the way, a lot of this behavior has been normalized. So I'm at the point now where I did 3 200s this year. I did 4 200s last year. And in fact, one of the 200s that I did this year was a route that I devised, and a friend of mine and I just sort of went out and did it one weekend as a fun thing. And so my attitude or perception of this is so skewed. All this seems really normal. I wish I could go back to when I was just starting, and something as weird and crazy as a 250 miler would still be so shocking to me, but it's wild.
Yeah, that's yeah, insane to most people. Most
That's
people
exactly right.
yeah. Yeah, I guess my next question would be, what does your mindset look like going into something like that, taking something on that big?
Well, I think it's getting harder and harder for me to start these events, which is an interesting thing because in a way, physically, it's easier for me to complete these events. Having done 9 200s now, I have a lot of confidence that I can finish the distance. But at the same time, I have now the experience of having done it 9 times. And in all of that time, there was a lot of suffering and a lot of pain and a lot of unhappiness. And so now when I start a 200, I'm actually scared because I know what's ahead. Whereas when I started doing these things, I was less scared at the starting line because I didn't know what was ahead. But now I have a bit of trepidation when I start an event. And in fact, the Oregon 200, which I did back in August, I felt like I was almost this close to thinking about quitting on the first day. I was having a miserable time. And I knew that it was gonna be a rough day, continuing to be a rough day. But I also knew from my experience that my days get better and better. And usually by day 3, I'm having a really good time, running well and having like almost like a runner's high of good emotion. So I knew in that event that I just needed to get through day 1 to a better side of day 2 and day 3. So my mindset is one of expectation of it's going to be really challenging, but I'm going to be leaning on my experience and my past history to help guide the way towards, getting through it. And also, I also look forward to this promise of a good later race. Day 3 and day 4 are usually pretty good. So for me, the other part of it is a lot of preparation leads to just sort of having a little bit of an easy feeling that I've at least planned for everything I know how to plan for. So that being prepared allows me to sort of let go when I get to the starting line and know that the preparations that I've made are going to help guide me through, and I don't have to necessarily worry too much. with the knowledge that in any ultra, sort of your plans go out the window the moment the race starts anyway. You kind of have to adjust constantly. So um, it's the experience that guides me now to know that I've done it before, I can do it again. And even when it gets hard and I think I want to quit, if I could just push through, experience has shown me that I can finish.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you were saying about the body healing through one of these events throughout the course of 2, 3, 4 days. And it's just crazy to me, like to
It is
think that
amazing.
it's absolutely amazing. Um, I guess my next question would be, how do you maintain focus and motivation, like going through those pain caves and that just those deep uh, mental blocks and those walls that you hit? How do you like? What does your process look like for pushing through those? Do you just like I remember in the
Mm.
military when we would do really long, really, really tough, long marches, I would just think about random things, whatever that may be, like I used to just think about just anything, being on a beach somewhere, whatever, I mean, that's kind of a generic thought, but I'm just saying, like, I would just think of anything other than where I was at that moment.
Yeah.
But what does your process look like for that?
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to that.
Oh, it's interesting to hear what your process was. It would never have occurred to me to actually like think about something else. Because I think when I'm in my rough spots, all I can do is think about how rough it is, and I sort of degrade into feeling really sorry for myself and not in doing what you're doing, which is sort of try to lift your brain out of that thought into some other thought. I should try that sometime. For me, when it gets really rough, I well, I'll try to do some things. Like I'll try to get ahead of it or try to fix the problem, because a lot of times if you're low, it's a problem of you're tired or hungry or some combination of the two. So I'll try to get some calories in me if that's what the problem is. If I'm really tired, I might lay down on the trail for a 5 or 10 minute nap. Um, but there's also some times where it's just I just need to just keep moving forward, even though it might be slow and I might be having a real struggle. Um, because I know that staying put isn't going to help the situation. I need to get towards the next aid station. I need to get to that next checkpoint where I can at least take a break. And feeling sorry for myself doesn't necessarily help, but it also doesn't necessarily hurt, because at least I can commiserate with myself about how hard this is. I can complain to myself about the challenge. And even and then with if I'm with another runner, sometimes we'll pair up for a while on the trail. We can commiserate together about the struggles we're going through, and that can feel nice to let me know that I'm not totally alone in the suffering. But for me, I don't want to quit, even when there's times when I do kind of want to quit. As long as my body isn't so physically in trouble that I have to stop, which hasn't happened yet, thankfully. For me, I'm really motivated to get to that finish line, to get to the next aid station so I can see my crew and then just continue along, just to have that, for me, it's really satisfying to have completed the entire event.
Yeah, one thing that's awesome. And one thing I've noticed a lot about your videos, or the races you run, and I'm not trying to compare you to anybody else because everybody is on their own journey and everything, but
Yeah, of
you
course.
always seem to finish very strong. Like you seem to be well put together at the end of a race. Whereas I've seen a lot I've seen a lot of these ultra marathons, people are hallucinating and just totally out of it by the end of one of these things. And it's, you know, like I said, you seem to be well put together. I don't know. Is that the case, or are you just putting on a facade there? Just, I mean,
It's it might be a combination of truth and fiction. I mean, I'm definitely having a struggle, and I definitely don't record as much of the struggle as what happens. But I also do try to get across a little bit in the flavor of the video when there are significant struggles that I want to make sure that the user sees. But I also think that in some ways I am put together at the end, because I really do try to take care of myself to some reasonable degree during the event. I mean, I finish usually in the top 30% or 25% of the runners. So I'm not racing the thing. Like the runners who are at the very front will be running a lot harder than I'm running. And I think that by having a more moderate pace, I'm putting my body in a little bit less struggle, or sort of not putting myself in such a deficit where I'll be really struggling towards the end. I try to get a decent amount of sleep, but not too much sleep. So I'll sleep about 6 hours maybe during a 250 total over the course of the 4 days. And that's just enough to kind of keep me relatively sane. And I have some hallucinations, but my hallucinations are usually pretty mild and they're usually always the same. So I'll have deja vu about knowing that I've been in a spot before that I've never been to. And sometimes I just see something innocuous like writing on the rocks. And so I'll sometimes look at the rocks and try to decipher what it says. And I realize, oh yeah, that's right. I'm having my hallucination now.
Right.
But yeah, I am kind of together because I've been trying to have a reasonable, time where I don't want to be suffering too much.
Mhm. Um, so, like where does the energy come from, and what are you typically fueling with for 4 days of running? Like what does that mainly consist of?
That's been an area that has been a challenge this year, as I've found some of my fueling is not working very well, and so it's something that will be evolving. I guess it's kind of always evolving, but I'm right now trying to figure out some problems. Um, but essentially, I will try to do some kind of real food, a significant meal. At some of the major aid stations. So a lot of the aid stations offer burgers, or pizza, quesadillas, burritos. So it's some kind of substantial amount of food or with substantial calories, but also like has some denseness to it. So I will usually do that at aid stations, and then along the segments in between aid stations, I'll carry with me some kind of goo or gel. I also like some maple syrup products. That really works well for my stomach. So I do, and then also I sometimes put powdery products in my water that have like electrolytes and calories also. So in my chest bottles, I'll be drinking my calories as well. Um, but it's a bit of a balance because depending on how my body's doing, that it works less. The strategy works less. So last couple of races and during the first day, I've had a lot of nausea. And so I've not been able to get in the calories that I would like to. And so if I have a nausea problem, then I have to manage getting calories in maybe by drinking broth or just focusing on drinking Coca-Cola as much as I can at aid stations. And then my experience has been that the first day is kind of the worst. And then as I go on, my body starts to accept the things like burgers a bit more easily. But yeah, that's kind of it. I think a lot of us in the 200 running community really like that our aid stations are a place where you can sit down and have a yummy burger. It's not like you have to grab a gel and then keep running down the trail. It's nice and civilized with a lot of calories. I think somebody even called them they're basically just food eating contests with a little bit of running involved. So it's
What
kind of fun.
what would you estimate in one of those races calories wise you consume? I
Oh,
If you've
oh,
ever
I would absolutely have no
no
idea.
idea.
I know that
Yeah.
a lot of runners do like have a plan, like every hour I'm going to consume 200 calories, and so they can easily do that. I'm afraid I'm not that well organized. In fact, I forget to eat, so I have a alarm on my phone that goes off every 45 minutes just to remind me that if I haven't eaten recently, that I should. But yeah, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to tell you. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of calories that we're consuming.
Yeah.
But of course, we probably can expend a lot more than that.
Sure. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, but yeah, no, that's wild. Can you speak a little bit on the recovery process and what that looks like, taking care of your mind and your body after one of these events?
Yeah, the recovery after a large ultra is can be really challenging, both physically and mentally. Now, after my first ultras, my body hurt really bad. In fact, I was just talking with my fiance the other night about after my first 50 miler, I couldn't sleep the next night. My body was in so much pain; it was just shaking. My legs were shaking, and I was just hurting everywhere. Over time, as I've done more and more ultras, my recovery has gotten easier and easier. My body doesn't hurt nearly as bad after running a 200 as it did after running my first one. In fact, actually, I think faster, shorter races have a bit more of a recovery problem for me than the longer, slower ultras. I think the intensity of something like a 50 miler or 100K with so much more the idea that speed is more the race. It sort of does more damage to me. But for me, after an ultra, I'll sort of relax for a few days. My toes usually are pretty banged up, so I might have some numbness in my toes, and that will go away over the course of a month or maybe a few months after a really long ultra. I eat a lot. I am so ravenously hungry after an ultra that I'll eat a lot of food, eat big dinners, eat lots of meals. I don't necessarily do a lot of exercise for a few days. I'll just sort of do movement to keep everything limber, but I'll take a few days off. It might even be a week or more before I actually go for a light run. But the problem is also the mental side of recovery, because it's after not if I don't run for a week, that starts to really get to my depression levels. And I also really have a hard time coming down off of the emotional high from the event. The event is like everything that I want to be in all the time. It's happiness and all my friends, and I feel so good there that when I come back to real life, the re-entry process to normal living is also a real challenge for me. So I haven't quite got that figured out yet, but I try to focus on talking to my friends, being around other people as much as I can. And also the eating of good food is a good thing. But yeah, it's for me, after a couple of weeks, I start to feel a little normal, and this is after a 200 miler. The body being really tired is something that kind of lingers for a couple of weeks. Yeah, but then probably after 3 weeks, I'm starting to get back into training and getting ready for the next thing.
Yeah, I saw you did what, four of these ultra or these over 200-mile races in one year in 2022.
That's right.
Yeah, is that something you're going to try again, or was that a
Well,
lot?
actually, an interesting thing about the what was the Triple Crown of 200s is a 3 race series that Destination Trail puts together, and then in May is the Cocodona 250. And so somebody came up with the name the Grand Slam of 200s if you do all 4 of those races in one year. And so I did Cocodona, and then had I think a 5 week period before I did the next one, Tahoe, and then I think 6 weeks until Bigfoot, and then maybe something like 6 or 7 weeks until I did Moab. But what was really interesting was the recovery time between those races got better and better and better. And after each race, I actually felt better than I did after the previous one. And I actually felt stronger and stronger and stronger through each of those races as well. It was a really remarkable thing to do that. I would have expected my body to maybe not like get better and better throughout the process, but amazingly, that's what I experienced. I don't think I'm going to do that exact same series again, at least not my current plan. There are lots of other 200s that are out in the world that I would like to explore. And running a 200 is so time consuming, and both on the training for the actual doing and the recovery, that I can't do them all. So I think I'm going to focus on some other races. But at the same time, my fiance is also interested in getting into 200s. So my hope is that I will be able to crew her at one of these things, and maybe even we'll do them together. So also in volunteering too. I also will return to some of these races as a volunteer if I can't run them, because I also just love giving back to the community in that way. And the next best thing to running one of these events is definitely volunteering at it.
Awesome. What advice would you give to somebody looking to push their limits in whatever it is that they do?
Oh, wow. Well, I've been really impressed with what my body has let me do in the last few years as I've pushed my limits. And I never thought that I was necessarily anything special of an athlete. I've always thought of myself as a pretty regular person who found running to be quite difficult. But as I've trained and worked hard, it's become something that I have some aptitude for. But to me, it really comes down to have dedicated a lot of time and training to it. So if somebody was thinking about getting into something like this, my advice would be just to be dedicated and consistent in the training, because it's the consistency of training that really helps lead to the improving. You don't necessarily have to kill yourself in any single training run, but it's just consistency that makes a big difference. And then patience, because it's sometimes you might have a goal thing that you want to work towards, but you can't go, or most people can't successfully go from couch to 200 miles really quick. It takes a lot to train your body to take all kinds of abuse, and the only way for your body to learn that is through the various processes of training and trying lower distance races to build it up. But it is definitely possible. I think anybody can do these crazy things. It just takes dedication and time and a real motivation to want to stick to it. But they're amazing, life-changing activities and events, and I really encourage anybody who is fascinated by the idea of what your body can do and how you can learn more about your limitless potential. The best way to do that is just to get out there and try it, and it's an amazing sport that I love, and I'm happy to share it with other people.
Well, that's that's a great answer, and I really appreciate your insight. And yeah, so you got anything coming up?
Oh, well, I just finished my last 200 of this year, and I'm kind of in a little bit of a training break for just a moment as I pause to both reflect on what we did this year, but also just take a break. Sometimes I look at my training schedule and I'm just like, I'm so tired, I want a break. So taking a little bit of a break. And then I did sign up for Cocodona 250 in May of 2024. That's gonna be my 4th time running that race. So yeah, pretty soon I'll just start looking for some smaller ultras to put on the calendar in between now and May, just to sort of help me with my training. But then I'm sure there'll be other things happening also in 2024 later on. So that's all to be discovered. My race schedule, by the way, is at wesplate.com. So for not only can you see my ultra history at wesplate.com, but you can also see what I will be running once that schedule gets filled out. So be sure to check it out.
Well, thank you for your time, Wes. I appreciate it. And good luck on the next one.
All right. Thanks a lot. Great talking to you.
I'm no king, I'm no god, just a man among the crowd. I don't raise my cup to please, but don't mind the company. Say it as you should. This is your life.